So, what really happens when a great teacher, a great leader, faces their final days? It's way more than just a religious story. It's a deeply human drama, you know? It's about leadership, it's about mortality, and it's about that frantic race to preserve a world changing idea before the person who created it is gone forever. This is the story of the Buddha's final journey, and it kicks off not with some quiet meditation, but with a question about war.
All right, so let's set the scene. We're in ancient India, and things are tense. A really powerful king is right on the edge of making a big move, and he's about to ask for advice from a very, very unusual source.
Okay, so this is King Ajatashatru. His kingdom, Magadha, is on the rise, and he's got his sights set on the Vajjian Confederacy next door. Now, the Vajjians are wealthy, they're successful, and they are fiercely independent. The king's thinking? They need to be brought into the fold. And he's more than willing to use his army to make that happen.
But before he just marches his army in, the king does something pretty fascinating. He sends his top minister, a guy named Vasikara, on a special mission. And where's he going? To the mountain where the Buddha is staying. But get this isn't a pilgrimage to get a blessing. It's an intelligence-gathering mission.
The minister gets there and doesn't beat around the bush. He speaks for the king and asks the Buddha a direct, strategic question. We're planning to invade the Vajjians. Are we going to win? See, the king isn't looking for spiritual guidance here. He wants a military forecast from a man famous for his incredible wisdom.
But the Buddha, he doesn't give a simple yes or no. He doesn't offer some kind of prophecy. Instead, he turns to his attendant, Ananda, and starts this incredible line of questioning that basically redefines what it even means for a nation to be strong.
So instead of predicting the outcome of a battle, the Buddha starts asking his attendant, Ananda, a bunch of questions. He's like, Ananda, do the Vajjians meet up often and get along? Ananda says, yep, they do. The Buddha keeps going. Do they stay united? Do they follow their own laws? Do they respect their elders? And with every yes, the Buddha is building his argument. He's not talking about armies or fortifications, hard power. He's laying out these 7 pillars of what makes a society strong from the inside out. He's implying that real strength doesn't come from weapons. It comes from the community itself.
And the king's minister, the Sakara, he gets it. Instantly. He realizes that army sizes and battle plans are totally irrelevant. He says to the Buddha, look, if they're following even one of these principles, they'd be almost impossible to beat in a war, let alone all 7. How can an army conquer a society that's fundamentally united and just? So right after this amazing display of, worldly wisdom, the story takes a really sharp, really personal turn. The Buddha gets incredibly sick, and after he recovers, he makes a huge decision. One that's going to set the stage for his final days on Earth. The Buddha starts talking about his own death with this incredible clarity. He's 80 years old, and he compares his body to an old, busted cart, just barely held together with straps and quick fixes. There's no denial here, no fighting it, just a calm, clear-eyed look at reality. And in that state of total acceptance, he makes a conscious choice. He announces that in 3 months, he's going to lay down the weight of his physical body and enter what's known as Parinirvāṇa. You can think of it as the ultimate nirvana, a total release from the cycle of life and death. The key here is that this isn't something that's just happening to him. It's a deliberate act of his own will. And at the very moment he makes this decision, the ground shakes violently. The text explains that there are lots of reasons for earthquakes, from natural forces to the birth of a divine being. But the final, most profound reason, when a fully enlightened Buddha consciously decides to let go of his remaining time. It's a way of showing just how significant this personal choice is. His internal decision causes a massive external reaction. As you can imagine, the news that the Buddha is going to die sends shockwaves through his community, and it especially hits his closest attendant, Ananda, really hard. This next part is the real emotional heart of the story, and it leads to the Buddha's most famous and final teaching.
It's such a powerful contrast, right? On one side, you have Ananda. He is just heartbroken. He's literally leaning against a doorpost, weeping, completely overwhelmed by the thought of losing his teacher. He begs the Buddha to stay, for everyone's sake. And then on the other side, you have the Buddha, just completely calm. He gently reminds Ananda of a core lesson. Everything that's put together has to, eventually, come apart. He asks him, Ananda, what did you expect? Did you think a person could live forever?
And right then, he delivers his final, most powerful instruction. He tells Ananda and everyone else that they can't depend on an external guide anymore, not even him. From now on, they have to be their own light, their own refuge. Their new guide will be the teachings themselves, the Dharma. I mean, this is the ultimate act of empowerment. He's turning his followers from students into self-reliant masters of their own path.
3 months go by and the Buddha passes away. And almost immediately, the community he spent his life building faces a massive crisis, one that threatens to tear the whole thing apart and basically undo the very message of peace he taught.
The moment the news gets out, a super tense standoff begins. 8 different kingdoms send their armies, and they're all demanding a piece of the Buddha's cremated remains, his relics. The irony here is just incredible. The man who taught nonviolence is now, in his death, about to be the cause of a massive war. Just as it looks like swords are about to be drawn, a wise Brahmin steps forward. He reminds all the angry kings about the Buddha's teachings on peace and patience. And it works. His logic cuts through the tension. The kings agree to stand down, and the sacred relics are divided up peacefully into 8 equal parts, one for each kingdom to build a memorial shrine.
And this brings us to the most crucial turning point in the whole story. The Buddha's physical body is gone. His ashes are now scattered all over the country. If his legacy was tied to his physical presence, well, it was now hopelessly fragmented. The survival of his message now depended completely on something you can't even touch, his words.
Because they realized this, the senior disciples organized what we now call the First Buddhist Council. Hundreds of enlightened monks who had known the Buddha personally all gathered together with one single, incredibly urgent goal: to collect and write down every single teaching he had ever given. And who was at the center of all of this? Ananda. The very same disciple who was weeping uncontrollably was also the one who had been by the Buddha's side for decades, hearing every single sermon. He recited everything from memory, starting each teaching with the phrase, "Thus have I heard." This monumental effort, this act of communal memory, is what transformed a living, spoken tradition into a lasting written scripture. The real legacy wasn't in the ashes anymore. It was in the words.
So this ancient story really leaves us with a very modern question, doesn't it? What does it actually take for an idea to outlive the person who came up with it? This story seems to suggest that a legacy isn't automatic. It needs a clear and powerful message, sure, but it also needs a community that's dedicated to preserving it, and the wisdom to know that when the person is gone, it's the idea itself that has to become the guide.